Good afternoon. In the fall, math teachers at every level are going to face an intensified version of the same old dilemma. How can our students learn grade level content if they haven't mastered that content from those previous grade levels? Get More Math has a solution. Get More Math is a powerful tool for math teachers everywhere. And if you aren't using Get More Math yet, I'd encourage you to sign up for our free trial. Josh will share a little more information about that later. But before Josh begins, I want to make sure you know where to ask questions. Over on the right-hand side of your screen, you can enter your question. And there's then a button that says Send Your Question. Make sure you hit that so that I can see that question on the other end. I'm going to answer part of those questions as we move through the discussion, and Josh will answer other questions at the end. So let's get started. Speaking with us today is Josh Britton, CEO and founder of Get More Math. Josh loves teaching kids to think mathematically. Every year since he started teaching in 1996, he's been experimenting with the best practices in teaching. In fact, he started developing Get More Math to leverage his own time in the classroom and to ensure that every student, regardless of their aptitude, is able to grow their math skills. So listen as Josh talks about turning learning loss into learning recovery.
Well, welcome. My name is Josh Britton. I'm the founder and CEO of Get More Math. And this session is about turning learning loss into learning recovery. I have a whole big schedule, but I'd like to start with a little bit about myself, my own story, so you know where I'm coming from. I taught math for about 20 years in southeastern Pennsylvania, typically to ninth grade and usually to students who had struggled in sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade. They arrived at ninth grade, and my challenge was to teach grade level content and ensure that students made significant gains in algebra despite perhaps not being entirely prepared for that scenario. So my first year of teaching, I loved kids. I went in on a strong relational angle. My chief tool was just caring about kids and spending time with them. And I thought it was making a really big long-term difference. I saw kids start paying attention. They started making some gains. They started passing some tests. And I wish I could tell you that first year was a wonderful experience. And it really was, up to the very end when I gave my very first final exam. And if you've been in math education for a while, you could probably see this coming. Over half of my students, my algebra students, failed my first Algebra 1 exam. I was completely surprised, and it was really painful. I mean, I put everything I had into that teaching year, and yet my students were going to be going on to the next year really unprepared for the next school year. And so the cycle continued. So that really launched for me a career-long quest for winning the long game. In other words, how can we make it stick? How can we get students to the end of the school year as content area masters and not just sort of only remembering what they learned the last maybe 2 or 3 weeks? I tell this story because it has huge implications for this session. I became all about the long game. I was deeply interested in winning each day, kids making steady little bits of gains, but I knew then that all that hard work wasn't relevant if I didn't also invest heavily from the outset in ensuring that those gains were retained through the months, through October, November, February, and on into the end of the school year. So as we talk today about learning recovery and what that might look like, and in particular strategy that I love and used many times successfully, it's all going to be with the long game in mind. All right, I'm going to try to share my screen here. And this is always an adventure, I'm sure, some of you, right? See if I can get this going. Okay, so I do have a schedule, and I'll go through that with you quickly. I'm going to start by mentioning the long game. We'll talk about what I call fundamentals. We'll address the phrase learning loss. We'll talk about 3 approaches to learning loss and learning recovery, with an emphasis on my favorite. Finally, at the heart of the session, we'll talk about using Get More Math and its mixed review feature to win the long game as we look to learning recovery. And I just want to make sure you know there is a free full year school pilot available to schools that haven't used Get More Math, and I'd love to make sure you know about that. So again, the heart of this session is going to be on this thing called mixed review. Sometimes people call it spiral review, but the idea that we can win the long game by addressing not just new material on a regular basis, but also reaching back and drawing in old material. So I already talked about the long game. That's going to be our goal. Let's get kids to the end of the school year as content area masters. When I say fundamentals, I just think it's worth a moment. Here we are talking about curriculum and instructional strategies. It's worth a moment stepping back and just acknowledging corporately that if we don't address the fundamentals, the social and emotional health of our teachers and our students, this conversation that we're having today is largely useless. You have to have the foundation. So if you're in a power position, if you have influence on how teachers and students are set up for this fall, I want to encourage you to empower your teachers as much as possible, so that we don't actually move more and more into this thing, teacher loss, which would be a whole different session. Well, let's talk about learning loss. You'll see I put it in quotation marks. And that's because this phrase, it's been bandied about quite a bit recently in media, and I've even seen it in legislation. And I think it's probably a good idea to say what we mean and maybe what we don't mean. What do people often mean? They mean, at first, quite simply, learning that got lost. This is not a new concept for anyone in education. Kids make gains, kids lose gains. I told you about my first year and what an incredible amount of learning loss there was that I didn't really even realize until the end of the school year. Some people call it summer slide. We all know that when we try to learn something, much of what we try to learn gets lost. But there's this other meaning that's often, I think, implied in the phrase learning loss. It's learning that never even happened in the first place. We have students who've dropped off the grid. We have strategies that didn't address as much as we normally were able to address. All of us doing the best we could with a difficult situation, but still, there's some learning that didn't happen. And here is why I put the quotation marks around learning loss. I think as I just read media and read Twitter and such, it's many people experience it as pejorative. They experience it as if it's suggesting there's someone at fault. And, really, ultimately, the fault lies in Mother Nature and the virus and the horrible times that's inflicted on all of us. So anyway, if I were in an administrative position, I would use that phrase with care and really drive towards the scenario or the situation in which we find ourselves, which is students will come into this fall with an unusual amount of missing precursor skills. So as you're thinking about what are we going to do to start the school year up, I'm sure you have in your mind, wow, we're going to have kids who really are not well prepared. Of course, there will be kids who are very well prepared and kids who are sort of well prepared. Well, the good news at this stage is that there's nothing new here. It's the tale as old as time. As long as I was teaching math classes and as long as I was teaching ninth grade in particular, students would come into my class with missing precursor skills. So this is something we know about and something we've had lots of time to develop strategies for and address. It's, I suspect, going to be exacerbated this fall, but let's take what we know works and double down and do it extraordinarily well and win the day with time-honored strategies. Getting back to the schedule, here are 3 time-honored strategies. There are 3, and I do have a sort of a dog in this fight. I'm opinionated, so I'll just confess that. But also, I wish to honor you. I realize you may prefer a different strategy that I prefer, and also you may not have a choice in what strategy you use, depending on your position. So none of these is horrible, but I do have a favorite. I'll end with a favorite and really double down. Speaking of doubling down on my favorite, but I'll start with my least favorite. So in the fall, one approach would be students come into the room, and the first thing we do is we do a heavy diagnosis, big test. Let's find out lots of data. What do the kids know? What do they not know? And then commence a pretty intense remediation, where maybe the first couple of weeks, maybe even the first couple of months, we're doing everything we can to take that data we've identified, the weaknesses we've identified, and pursue them on an individualized basis. That has some strengths. It's accessible to very new teachers because it's very mechanized. and it's sort of systematic, right? And clear, and it feels clean. It has some weaknesses, and my regret when I see this done, and I see this done, to be honest, I did this for several years, was it's a huge loss of prime real estate. Kids come to school, they're like, what's this year going to be like? I hope it's different. I hope it's new. I'm excited. Who's this teacher? What's this topic? And the teacher says, well, we're starting with a huge test. And then we're going to spend weeks and weeks and weeks cycling back over a bunch of old stuff. And by the time you get to the new content, the exciting part in October, let's say, the kids' eyes are already glazing over and they've already kind of gotten the message. It's same old, same old. So that's a significant disadvantage of diagnosing and remediating. I have further thoughts on that matter, but since it's not the primary topic, let's go to the second frequent approach. Now, I've seen a lot of people advocate this idea of acceleration. It's an odd word because as I see it used, it doesn't mean what it seems to say, which is to go faster, right? Accelerate. It means to have like a second tier of math for students. So you have your student in a regular math class, but then you give her maybe a 45-minute one-to-one tutoring every afternoon. And of course, that has huge advantages. The relational aspect is just perhaps the most powerful thing you can have. Another person caring and spending time with a student. And it gives freedom then to address needs individually. It does have, I've done this as well. And one disadvantage I've discovered is there's a limit to how much kids can learn in a day. So you think of the sponge idea where it can pull up so much water, but then you could drop a full sponge in a puddle and it won't pick up a single drop because it's packed. So I kind of have experienced students learning like that sometimes too. You can give a student 10 hours of math a day, right, to take it to an extreme, and it's not going to be effective at some point. Well, and then finally, my favorite, and what this session is going to really get down and into the weeds on, there is no pithy phrase for this that I know of, although I welcome one if you have it. I've read about it, like the NCTM advocates this approach. You'll see other research that's fairly common advocating this approach. I call it just-in-time critical precursors. The idea here is start the school year on grade level content. Now, we all know that sometimes grade level content will be too hard for a student who's missing a critical precursor. So we need a way to address the missing precursors, but we still want to focus on the grade level content and make gains on the target grade. So I did this for 20 years, teaching Algebra 1. Day one, I started teaching algebra, got kids involved, got them to tie into the main idea, had exciting, vigorous dialogue and problem solving from the first day. But starting the second day, I started to weave in on a kind of a semi-regular basis, critical precursor skills that would support the following grade level content. So it became a weave, some grade level content, and then duck aside to kind of address coordinate plane, back to grade level content, and duck aside to address solving two-step equations. But I wasn't attempting to solve or rectify every issue, all the skills and concepts that my students had perhaps missed or lost over the years, but rather just the ones that were totally vital. So that's what I call just-in-time critical precursors. All of these approaches, whichever you choose or some other, have some commonality. All of us want to take the students as we find them and give them a year of strong gains, some stability, some growth. But I would say that then that challenge, that long game challenge, is present no matter which of these approaches you take. In other words, this phrase, retaining the gains, becomes a critical component. If you put all your heart and soul into learning recovery in the fall, and then you get to May and you find that all that work has already kind of faded away, what have you really achieved? So the challenge is not just addressing some of the loss or focusing on recovery, but also maintaining your fight against the attrition that occurs over the year. And that's what gets us to Get More Math and Mixed Review. And that's really the core of this session. How can you win the long game? How can you make sure students arrive in May having recovered and having learned a whole year of growth? Before I take the plunge into that, I just want to address I hear little like questions coming up, and I can't remember what I said at the beginning, but uh, I intend to answer questions at the very end. So I'm excited about getting to that, but I'm going to kind of plow forward in the meantime. So just a quick word about Get More Math. It's something I made for myself to address long-term retention. It was after that frustrating beginning, the first couple of years really, when I realized I needed to do something different. Because if you looked at my typical day, the first couple of years of teaching, and you made a pie chart of the minutes that I spent in the classroom, you'd see that most of the minutes were spent on a lesson. I was making sure students engaged. They were happy, good, strong lessons. Students were building their knowledge. They were understanding more and more. And I was also making time for practice. I wanted them independently to demonstrate that they understood the new ideas. So every day there was a lesson and there was practice of new material. But remember, while that felt right, when I got to the end of the school year, I found that students have lost most of those gains. So that pattern, that investment of minutes needed to change. It needed some improvement. Over the course of my 20-year career, I did make a change. I made a massive change that I believe honors the brain. So I'd like to say it's like more brain friendly. If you want something to stick, you can't just learn it and move on. You need to learn it. And then over time, in an interleaved, spaced fashion, you need to return to it. Some people call this spiral review. I like to call it mixed review. What I mean by that is a dedicated portion of time on a daily basis that is for long-term retention instead of just learning the new stuff constantly. That would be cumulative, ideally, a little bit from yesterday, a little bit from a week ago, a little bit from 2 months ago, and ideally individualized so that each student is getting a daily mix of review particularly suited to her needs. That's why I made Get More Math. I wanted that. I had a vision for that, and so I pursued it. It took me a long time, but now it's a company, and lots of teachers across the country are using it and seeing good results. Get More Math, I should say, does not provide any instructional content. So you'll see in my little pie chart on the side there, the lesson is grayed out. I wrote it for myself, and since I am a teacher, I love humans teaching. So I never made anything that has any instructional content, but rather what it does is the heavy lifting that teachers don't need to do. Provide the practice for the new lesson, provide the mixed review to make sure that students are retaining their gains. So if we take that idea of mixed review and go back to the primary flow of this webinar, which is how can we deal with learning recovery? And we see our 3 different methods. I told you just-in-time critical precursors are definitely my favorite. It's where I had the most results. That's why I liked it the most, right? We're driven to see students really make gains. So what I would like to do now is take these 2 ideas and put them together, like chocolate and peanut butter. Well, at least I find chocolate and peanut butter a very good mix. If you don't like that mix, think of 2 things you like to mix together. To do that, I'm actually going to go straight to the app, and I'm going to emulate what it is that a teacher could do, the thought process and the specific use of Get More Math that would empower teachers to weave critical precursors into the flow so that mixed review then would constantly be bringing those back in, and you get to the end of the school year with strong gains. This will take a few minutes, but stay with me because it gets more and more exciting as the pieces start to come together. All right, so here we are at the teacher app. I am logged in as a teacher, and I'm thinking about my school year. I know what I want to start with. Just to kind of get you acclimated, you can see there's a vertical selector, 3, 4, 5, 6. Get More Math covers grades 3 through Algebra 2 and Math 3. I've selected Algebra 1 because that's my specialty. And I want to start with linear word problems. That's a whole nother session, but I've always believed that like word problems should precede just process. So that's one of the first things I want to do. So I've chosen Algebra 1, and I'm going to navigate Get More Math Skill Bank on the right side of the screen. I'm on the Work tab, I should have said. I've chosen Algebra 1. So I'm going to click on Linear Concepts, and I'll scroll down, and I'll click on Linear Word Problems. And finally, I've opened up Identifying Key Features. I see this thing called Form 1. I read it. Oh, that's it. That sounds really good. If there's a blue hexagon on Get More Math and you're a teacher, this is a skill. So you've found a skill. If you click on it, it gives you an example. See where it says sample? So I see there's some words and a question for rate of change, and down at the bottom, starting amount. Looks like there's more. So I scroll down a little bit. Ooh, there's a coordinate plane. Well, I have taught for many years, and I know at this stage that many students, despite the best intentions of their prior teachers, come to ninth grade with mixed up notions about the coordinate plane. So I'm thinking this grade level content presupposes the ability to plot a point. And I need students to arrive at this concept without being like encumbered with like snarling up 1,2 being different than 2,1 or 0,4 and 4,0. And I know that if you teach algebra, you're thinking, yeah, that's how it rolls, because anybody who's taught has hit those particular hitches. That is what I mean by a critical precursor. So hold everything. Let's make an assignment that addresses this. So I'm going to go back and click on this plus. This is the first time I've done that. I'm going to make an assignment with you. See, create an assignment. I'll click there, and then I'll put in an assignment name. I'll call it coordinate plane. And then I need to find problems that have coordinate plane problems. So Get More Math has a search feature. I'll type in a keyword such as coordinate, and it'll light up the screen. If you note that on the vertical selector now, the 5, the 6, the 7, there's these orange dots. An orange dot means there's content here. So the 5th grade skill bank has coordinates. The 6th grade, boy, coordinates are popular. But I'll stick to Algebra 1 and click on Algebra Foundations and navigate to find the coordinate plane content. Oh, there it is. So I'll click on that. I have even more choices. Get More Math has over 3,000 dynamically generated skills. So there's a lot to choose from. And finally, I'm going to click on Basic Coordinate Plane. I'm just trying to get the basics down. Let's see about plot integer points. Remember, the blue hexagon is actually a dynamically generated skill. All right, is this what I want? I can click on the refresh a couple of times and see the different problems changing. I think, you know what, this is good. This is the precursor skill that I really wanted. So I'll add it to my assignment. On the left side of the screen, that's the assignment I'm building. Remember, I named it earlier. And now if you look at the bottom, it says plot integer points. That's one skill for my assignment. Well, I'll choose maybe one more. This is different because now it's write the points coordinates as opposed to click on. And I like that too. So I'm going to throw one of those in as well. So now you see on the left side, there are 2 skills. I'm going to save my assignment and actually assign it. Assigning it to period 3, and I'll click assign. And then we'll go check out what it looks like on a student screen. The student screen takes a little bit of getting used to it first. Top middle is the name of the assignment the student's currently working on. We, when we were teachers a moment ago, we made that assignment and assigned it. So when a student logs in, that's what she'll see. Probably the thing that's most important to understand is that each colored square represents one skill. Well, that should make sense, right? Remember, we chose 2 coordinate plane skills, one for clicking on and one for writing the coordinates. So those 2 colored squares represent the 2 skills that we just chose. The 6 means we chose, we used the default of 6 points required to finish the assignment. So the student could work on this problem here or click on the other square to see an example of the other kind of skill. And this student over time is going to be working on our precursor assignment. Some students will just buzz right through this because, you know what? They know it already. No harm done. But do you see how I didn't have to do a diagnosis here? Rather, I just went ahead and pushed the precursor assignment out there and see what happens. The students who struggle, the students who can't get the problems right, well, then I'm going to come along, or I'll have other students come along and work with those students on the precursor skills until everybody can complete this assignment successfully. Meanwhile, we'll go back and make an assignment that addresses the grade level content. Remember, that's the goal is to hit grade level content. So I'm going to make another assignment. I'll go faster this time since we've seen it once before. Click on the assignment. I'm going to call it linear word problems 1, and I'm going to add the skill that I was looking at earlier. So now I have a grade level assignment to give. I can save it. I can assign it, give it to the class. So at some point when a student's finished the first assignment, this is the second assignment. You can see now in the top middle, it says 0, 3, linear word problems 1. So there's only one square because I only put one skill into this assignment. So now we have two assignments we've given, a precursor skill assignment with two things in it, two skills, and then our grade level assignment with one skill in it. You're perhaps wondering, if we were in person, you might be at this point objecting, Josh, didn't you say you're going to show mixed review? I hope that's in your mind. Like, he said mixed review was the most important thing, and we haven't seen it yet. All right, let's get back to it. Let's suppose the student we've been following has finished all of her assignments. So I'll show you that in Get More Math. If you click on the Classes tab and Assignments, you can look at results from assignments. So like the coordinate plane assignment, I can see that this is the student we've been following, Lakeisha Pemda. She has 6 points earned out of the 6 needed points. She finished it. And the coordinate plane assignment, and the linear word problem assignment, if we look at that, we see that she has the 3 points earned out of the 3 points that are required. Here's where Get More Math becomes powerful. If a student logs in and she's finished all of the assignments, what will happen? Well, I'll just spill it. She will get mixed review. Mixed review is a mode that presents all the skills the student has been assigned and spirals the student through those in a methodical, individualized fashion. You see how right now it says mixed review at the top of her screen, and you see that there are 3 colored squares. Well, remember, we gave an assignment with 2 precursor skills and an assignment with 1 grade level skill. That's where those 3 colored squares have come from for her mixed review session. She can click on any of the squares and see an example of one of the skills that have been assigned to her over time. So this third square, if you're really with me, you should be able to kind of visualize what will happen. It's one of those word problems, the linear word problems. All right, well, let's press ahead. The next day, let's say, we give another assignment. This is more grade level content. I called it linear word problems. Note there's a 2 there. And again, I've given a word problem of sorts. But notice that now there's a button to the right of that says change assignment. So there are 2 ways students can get to mixed review. One is, as you already saw, they can get to mixed review because they don't have any assignments left. They can also get to mixed review by clicking on change assignment, and then they get a choice of all the assignments that they haven't done. In this case, our student finished all the assignments, but she can click on mixed review and see now everything that's ever been assigned. So again, now she's in mixed review again, and there are 4 colored squares. Get More Math always shows a math problem because we don't want to support distractions. So we encourage students to get right to it. But I'm actually going to remove the math problem from the screen because what I want to focus on is the colored squares, what they represent, and the power in the system. The first 2 came from the first assignment. Remember that? The coordinate plane, the precursor skills. The next one came from the second assignment that I gave. That was grade level content. And then finally, this is from the third assignment, also grade level content. So you can see how this is going, right? The next day, perhaps we do the 4th assignment and it's more precursor skills. When the student gets to mixed review, she'll have now, I think we're up to 4 precursor skills and 2 grade level skills. And then next day, maybe we'll do another assignment and maybe that's grade level content. Well, I'm not going to go through 6th day, 7th day, 8th day, 9th day. I think you get the idea. I'm going to go ahead and skip forward to assignment number 40. Here's what the screen looks like at assignment number 40. The bottom right corner shows 3 skills that were added with assignment 40. Maybe that's more grade level content, let's say. But by now, there's tons of colored squares when a student is working in mixed review. These represent all of the skills that have been assigned over the year thus far. And the power of Get More Math is that we're going to make sure students go back and keep working through those problems even while the student's advancing into further assignments. So every day the student will do new assignments, but also spend some time on mixed review. All right, to really understand what I just said, you need to get into the details. So I call this a slow motion replay. I'm gonna walk you through assignment 40 and hopefully address some of the questions that you've been asking yourself as I've been whizzing through all of these screens. So I'm going to slow it down, step it back a moment. Suppose I've just given assignment 40. So here's our student, F. Johnson. She's showing up and she sees on the screen assignment 40. It's called slope. Apparently that's the concept. And you see that she has 0 of 9 points required, and there are 3 colored squares on the screen. So this is a focus practice. Imagine the teacher's just taught the concept, and now the student's sitting down to make sure she gets some independent practice and she understands today's skill. This is, we'll say it's grade level content. And Get More Math, if you get the problem right, you get smileys, which is nice. And Get More Math will move you to a different colored square. You see the one on the right is now kind of highlighted with blue. So this is a different formulation of a slope problem. Of course, you need to see what happens if a student gets a problem wrong. So let me get this one wrong. 2 is not the answer. The student is informed that this is not correct. And Get More Math waits till the student fixes the problem. When she does, she gets smileys, but she does not get a point. Notice it still says 1 point today. That's because Get More Math only awards a point on correct on the first try. So if you get it wrong, you do need to fix it, and then we'll give you a new instance that's fairly similar to try again. This way, finishing an assignment actually means getting them right on the first try. So those 9 points, that once a student gets to those 9 points, that's 9 points correct on the first attempt. This one has a fractional answer. So let's put the fraction in and get it right, get our smileys. All right, I'm going to accelerate and get lots of problems right. Get this one right. 3 points later, when I get my 7th point, we'll see something interesting happen. The red square turned yellow. More on that in a moment. And our 8th point, and this is, again, a critical moment in this session to understand the Get More Math system for mixed review. When a student is on the verge of finishing this targeted assignment, so she's about to be done, and this is the moment where, I taught for years without this tool. Students would be, in the back of the room, kind of doing nothing, or maybe making trouble. I'd say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And they'd say, "Well, I'm done." In Get More Math, there's no such thing as being done, because as soon as you finish the assignment, we're going to use that time, the remaining time, to shift your screen automatically into mixed review. When you get to mixed review, it means your assignments are done, and now it's time to do some problems from last week, or 2 weeks ago, or 3 months ago. Remember, we're talking today about learning recovery. We're talking about the long game for learning recovery, which is to get to May, to get to June with a year's full of gains, having retained those gains. And this screen is the key. We don't just want to practice new content every day. We want to spend some time on mixed review. So you can see that assignment 40 has added 3 squares. We talked about that before. But what I really want to do now is explain a few of the functionalities. So if you've been wondering about colors, some of the squares are red. A red skill means really not that many gains yet. So that could be because we don't have much data, you haven't done it. Or it could be you've done it a bunch, but really you haven't been getting it right much. Yellow, I'd call that in progress. That's the second tier of progress. Green, we call proficient. In order for a student to get green, she has to demonstrate proficiency over time. So in one day, it's actually impossible to arrive at green. We need to see over time that when given similar problems, a student is still able to work them out well. So that's one of the real advantages of Get More Math, is instead of having a snapshot and just making assumptions on that snapshot, our data is based on a long arc. Finally, there are some super high levels. Anything black is good. Black with silver is quite good, and black with gold is amazing. Let's go back to the main screen. No doubt by now you've also noticed some of these colored squares have dollar signs, some do not. And that's because Get More Math chooses the squares the student is allowed to work on. Going way back to the presentation, remember I said I think mixed review should be individualized. Well, this is how Get More Math individualizes. It takes all of the skills that have been assigned, but then it thinks about that student's data trail and says, well, for today's session, in this case, let's see, there's 8 colored squares that have dollar signs on them, which means these are the 8 that our student may work on to get a point. She can work on the other skills, but they won't be worth a point. And typically teachers say, I need a certain amount of points to get like the full grade for the day. So this is a little test. If we were in person, I'd ask you out loud. Well, I'll ask out loud, but you would say the answer out loud. Here's F. Johnson. She's looking at her screen and she's thinking, I could work on the problem on my screen. Solve for M. Two-step equation. I'll have to get paper out. I'll have to show some work. That's a hassle. I want to do something that's easy. I want to get a point just like that. So my question to you, here's your little comprehension check, is which colored square will she click on to optimize her chance of getting a quick point? And then, of course, we don't have any dialogue. So now I'm going to answer my question. Remember, the colors indicate skill level. So she's scanning for a black one that has a dollar sign because black is the best. She sees one right there and she clicks on it. So now she's going to work on the one that has a dollar sign that's black. And sure enough, you look at the problem, convert 159% to decimal. Boy, those are super simple. She puts in the answer, she clicks submit, she gets her smileys. But look what happened to the black square. Remember how it used to have a dollar sign? Well, now it doesn't. It just has a star. What that means is if she were to click on it again and work on it again, it wouldn't be worth a point. It's only worth a point when there's a dollar sign there. So Get More Math is going to, over time, be changing where the dollar signs are as she progresses to individualize her forward movement. So each student would have that same experience, dollar signs in different places, moving as we detect greater weaknesses, greater strengths, etc. You can see Get More Math has moved her back to the solve for M problem that she was avoiding. So let's have her get that right. Good for her. And now there's still a dollar sign on that square because Get More Math has decided that for today, she should do a couple of those. Apparently that's an area of greatest need. But it's also put a dollar sign on a new square. Again, the dollar signs will keep being moved around per student to individualize that mixed review experience that each student gets. Okay, so hopefully what you've seen is this lovely mesh of just-in-time critical precursors, this idea of giving a grade level assignment, maybe some precursor assignment, a grade level assignment, weaving those back and forth and doing that in a tactical fashion, doing it just when you need it so that the skills are at hand and you can move ahead with the grade level content. And then how are you going to make sure you get to this end of the school year having retained that body of content? And that's where Get More Math can provide that critical element of mixed review. I did want to mention here that you could use mixed review to support whatever your practice. So suppose you are doing a diagnostic approach where at the beginning you kind of a front-loaded diagnostics and remediation approach. Still, you're going to face the same issue. You do all those remediations, you adopt all the strategies, you work really, really hard. You could easily use Get More Math and its mixed review component to make sure that that content is really sticking and that as you move then into the grade level stuff later in the year, you've got mixed review to carry the long-term retention. And the same could be said of anybody using acceleration. So going back to our schedule, we've largely completed our schedule. I did not put on the schedule 2 things, I think, 2 lightweight finishing things. First, let me mention though, that we do have a full year free school pilot. So if that's something that interests you, what you could do is go to our website. It's quite simple. It's getmoremath.com/offers. You could just go to getmoremath.com and click around. What you'll see there is you can, if you want to just start it right now and get your hands on it this afternoon, you'd be welcome to. You can fill in your information and get a 30-day free trial just to, I showed you some screenshots, but like trying it yourself. And then what we'd love to do, if it interests you, is set you up for your school up for a full year's free pilot that includes free trainings as well. And that's something we would love to interact with you on. So that's what I encourage you to do is go for the full year school-wide pilot. That's for any school that has not used Get More Math in the past. And also, if you are wanting to talk to one of our representatives, you could email info@getmoremath.com. That was one thing. That was the end of my schedule. But then I also want to just go back to fundamentals. If you're a teacher, there's all kinds of great strategies out there to address this fall and trying to get back to some stability and get learning recovery. But I just want you to know that all of us know that you are the most important thing. You, empowered, thriving, doing well, doing what you've done for years, again, to the best of your ability, that's the thing that's really going to win the day. We'd love to partner with you. So that was a thing. Oh, and then questions. So sort of the formal part of the presentation is done, but in the time we have remaining, as I said earlier, I've been studiously ignoring the questions so that I can stay focused. But now I'd be happy to take questions. So I have my partner, Jennifer, here, and she's going to jump in and kind of, she's been looking at the questions, and I don't know, Jennifer, what do we have? I can't hear you. I think maybe you're mute up.
I was muted. My apologies, because I just start talking and there I am. My apologies. So there was a question about when you go back and review other concepts, do you start from scratch on teaching them as if they'd never learned them? Or are you just going to hit the main points and assume the kids have some knowledge about those precursor skills?
Yeah.
But you might want to address how you do that.
Wow. So that's like a couple of days of sessioning on a topic. And it's one of the weaknesses of the just-in-time critical precursors is it takes a skilled veteran to know what to do and what not to do. It's one of the disadvantages. So if you have a brand new staff and you're saying, hey, I want you to use this critical just-in-time precursors, I don't know. I don't think that would work as well. You need somebody who's done it once or twice, hit those critical glitches, if you will, and knows what to anticipate and can think ahead and hit the precursor. So I can't answer with perfect granularity, but I'm not satisfied with the answer. It depends, but it does. So coordinate plane is a great example. When students would have studied coordinate plane in middle school or even sixth grade, they will have spent a lot of time on it and quite possibly gone further and deeper than I need my students to do. So what I do is I just identify the thing that I need the most. And I'm always just trying to pare that down, keep it simple, and just do that part. So yes, I do drop some aspects of it, and I just go for the piece that matters the most. And also, this is really, actually, I'm glad you asked this because it brings up something really wonderful. Because I do it via a precursor assignment, it really exposes to me the kids that have what they need and the kids that don't. And the kids that have what they need, like tear through the precursor assignment, like they do it in 3 minutes. Well, I don't need to waste their time. Their screen shifts to mixed review and they can start doing mixed review of grade level content. And I can really focus on the students who need that extra attention. And I think, okay, let's find out how bad this is and who needs what. Or maybe I can use the students who can tear through it as tutors to the students who need more help with the precursors, because obviously if they're tearing it through it, perhaps they're going to be an effective tutor. Of course, that takes some coaching as well. Let me take it to an extreme. Like I remember when I was a new teacher, I thought, for example, this is true. This is a true life and somewhat embarrassing story. I detected using diagnostics and remediation. So I used to be a diagnoser back in the day. I detected my students, ninth grade students, incoming students, were very weak with dividing mixed numbers. So, 1 1/4 divided by 2 3/7 or something. So there I was as an algebra teacher in September, reteaching dividing mixed numbers, which was just a complete waste of time. I like mixed numbers. I'm a math guy. I want kids to understand what they are and how to divide them. But that would be an example of really missing the message on critical precursors and chasing every precursor or every skill that should have been learned in the vast panoply of stuff in the first 8 or 9 years. So wandered a little bit on that answer, but I hope that was helpful. Jennifer?
I think that was good. All right, so there's another question. Do students eventually outgrow certain concepts? When they get to Gold Star, are they finished reviewing that one? Or will the students continue to review
So,
the demonstration?
yeah, that's a great question. The algorithm will progressively de-emphasize the things that students are very good at. So, for example, when we saw a screen with a whole bunch of colored squares earlier, some of them were black with a silver star, some of them black with a gold star. And our student, when she logged in, she only had a dollar sign, which means she's allowed to get a point on one of all of those black squares. And that's because Get More Math doesn't want to just give the things that she's easy at to her over and over again. It's overkill. There's at some point it's a waste of her time. So the idea of individualization is, well, let's mostly put you back on things that you aren't quite so good at. However, for two reasons, the algorithm does occasionally pull in problems that the students shown amazing gains on. So one reason would be just to do a quick check. Just because somebody was quite good at something in September and October and November doesn't mean we think in February, wow, I'm sure she's still fine. So occasionally the algorithm will prioritize one of those gold star ones. And then secondly, it will also occasionally do it intentionally as a psychological booster. So the algorithm thinks, let's give her something she's good at just to build her up, even though it's easy. The thought there is, like, if you think about it in the opposite, what if the algorithm just always fully identified the things that she was bad at? And actually, that's not just a what if. That's kind of like typical remediation, right? Just always be pushing the things a student is bad at. That isn't horrible, but the algorithm, I wrote the algorithm. It took me 10 years to do this. I wanted to lace in encouragement and let kids do things that were actually super easy for them and have that experience like, oh, I can do this. And yet not too often. So it's an interesting balance that the algorithm takes care of. The beauty is you don't have to do that. Get More Math does that.
I love that. That's one of the things that I love so much. All right. Someone else has asked a question. First off, we have someone who has been very appreciative. Ann Becker is one of our teachers who's used Get More Math, and she says that she wants to thank you for the program. Her students made some great strides. She also asked a question about how many skills that we would leave in mixed review. She knows that she's aiming for that, but where's a certain percentage?
That's a great question. So I know you're going to love it. You said Anne is the name?
Ann, yes.
Thank you, Anne, for chiming in, and I'm glad you're enjoying using Get More Math. You're going to love this answer, right? I'm going to expound on it, but it starts with those words, it depends. It really does, though, because on the one hand, you want a pretty big set of content in mixed review, but on the other hand, not so big that students aren't regularly cycling through it. So I'm going to get a little geeky on this. If you have never really used Get More Math, hold on. There's this concept of rotation days that you can find if you look at the mixed review report under classes. And one of the many different types of data you can see is something called rotation days. It is my favorite, but it's a little bit advanced. It shows you how many days is it taking a student on average to cycle through everything in mixed review. So there's like a healthy amount of rotation days and an unhealthy amount of rotation days, which I'll get specific to in a moment. But just conceptually, if you see, if it takes tons and tons and tons of days for a student to cycle through all the mixed review content, that could mean it's time to trim out some of your mixed review. And for those of you, again, who haven't used the program, you can, over time, you say, you know what, I liked having those precursor skills in there for a while, but I don't need them anymore. I'll just leave the grade level content in and I'll prune out the precursor skills over time, for example. So there's a way to control which skills remain for the whole school year and which ones don't. And I'm going to give you my number. My number for target rotation time was like, I capped it about 20 days. So once I saw that on average kids were taking more than 20 days to cycle through the mixed review, that's when I would start thinking, I need one of two things to happen: either more time in mixed review, so they have a chance to cycle through more, or if that's simply not possible, I need to face the music and look at the content in mixed review and choose the things that are least important to me, or maybe the ones that were precursor skills, or maybe the ones like, you know how you have some grade level content that builds on other grade level content? Well, if those are both represented in mixed review, I might pull out the earlier grade level content and maintain the one that kind of wraps that skill into it. So it's a lot of kind of strategery. And I'm finally going to give you the actual number of skills that ended up typically in Algebra 1. I ended up with in the 60 to 80 range. So that's what worked for me. I was able to maintain a healthy rotation time and have 60 to 80 key concepts, all the ones I cared about the most, still in mixed review to the end of the school year. That's a great question.
There you go. We also have a really good question as well. And knowing how much time that you had, I think you might want to answer this as well. This gentleman says, assuming that I use assignments for in-class work and then mixed review as homework, how many points would you recommend assigning as a goal for mixed review? We have a schedule. Yeah. So he has 1.5 hours twice a week.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
Wow, first of all, that's a fascinating pattern. So I've never, my very first year of teaching, 2 or 3 times a week, I had like something like that, but I didn't have, I've never really engaged in something like that. So let me think about that. So if you only see them 2 days a week, but you have tons of time. I'll tell you what I did, which doesn't quite connect to your situation, and then I'll do some guesswork, and then you can maybe get back to me and tell me how it goes. What I always did, because I had my kids 5 days a week, is I would choose a number of points per day. So let's say I made an assignment that was worth 6 points, and that was today's assignment. I would say, hey, everybody, today you need to get 10 points and get more math, which effectively would mean finishing today's assignment and 4 more. And I did that day after day after day. And I will tell you, I didn't tell them what the number was till the end of the school period. So they knew that if in class, they finished today's targeted work and they got some more points, quite possibly they'd be going home with nothing, with no more math to do, because they'd done all those problems right on their first try, both the targeted new material and some content from mixed review. But I also chose to tell them that number at the end of the period because that kept them guessing, kept them working, so they wouldn't just get to the 10 and stop. And also, I never knew what the number was going to be, quite frankly. I usually waited till the end of the period, looked at my data screen. There's a screen called current status. If you've not used the app before, you may not have seen that. But I could look down at the column and see, well, how many points do they have? And then this finally starts getting to your question, sir. I'm sorry I'm taking so long. But I would look at that column of, like at the end of your 90-minute period, I would look at that column and see how many points do kids have. And I typically would try to find the student who was a good student working hard, but not super good at my content. So that's the student I would have in my head as I chose a number that I felt was reasonable for her to reach for. So my numbers were usually based on one kid and one kid's capacity. And then that's how I would choose what more the students needed to do. I'll say though, in your situation, I would be really tempted to use points per week instead of points per day. They can see on their screen how many points they've earned this week. You can't, so you have to do a little math by pulling up a table that shows each day's points. But still, I think that if I only had them twice a week, but I had 90 minutes, my inclination would be to say, by Friday night at midnight, I want to see 30 points from Get More Math this week. And there's no excuses, because I'm having this conversation with you on Monday or Tuesday or what have you. I can help you with that today. We're going to see each other on Thursday. By then, you should have tried to already do it, because then you're coming back. Maybe you'll be stuck on a few, and I can help you with those as well. So a lot of teachers I know in middle school who only have like tiny amounts of time in class use like a week to week point total as a target. So all that said, there's a lot of variables and conditionals I think I would think about I would think about these things. The student who's not really good, you don't want to overwhelm her. It's high accountability. Get More Math is very high accountability. You have to get it right eventually. So that's a thing. And then I would think about time, like how long does it take kids in your class to get a point or maybe 10 points, and sort of bundle those thoughts together. How much time do you want that one student to be spending at home on a normal week? And that's probably the maximal amount of points you'd want to assign. How about that for extensive thoughts, but never like specifically telling you what to do?
Josh, I'm going to share with our folks the button that they can click on for the free trial as well. I know you shared that screen, but that way they have.
I forgot about that. Yeah. So I was clicking fast, and if you're thinking, hey, I want to check this out, I'm interested in the full year school pilot, and I want to get in there and like just mess around to see if this is really something that suits our needs, we'd love to have you do that. You can just click on that button, and that should take you to the site that I referenced earlier.
Yes.
Does this mean there aren't any more questions, Jennifer?
No, sir. There's another question. It says, lots of problems would require pencil and paper work. Do you look at or collect their work? Thinking about the temptation for kids to use other apps, like do things like that.
Yeah. So absolutely, I encouraged paperwork. I never collected it for non-exams. So, I forgot to say, and now some people are probably moseyed on, Get More Math does have exams, like a huge exam suite. I love it. It took us a long time to make it. And so if you're going to do diagnostics, I meant to mention that at that point. We'd love to support you with our exam suite. It's very we give all kinds of data, and we give you something called a follow-up test so that you can like retest to see if kids really learned. Anyway, getting to your question, which is what triggered this thought, I did collect work on exams, and I expected to see it. And they knew that, so that when we were doing normal practice, I always encouraged work. I wanted to see work. And I will tell you, anytime somebody came to me with a question, I mean, it was sort of the joke. I always said, well, let me see your work. And if they're like, well, I didn't show any work, I say, okay, go show your work and then come to me with your question. So I had a pretty hard and fast rule that I would only work with people who were taking the step of putting some work down. Now, when I say that, there's always flexibility. You have the student who doesn't know even how to get started, and so you do some hand holding. But generally speaking, I did have a paper and pencil expectation.
Right. And some folks are asking about the pilot program for next year, and would there be a need for further training before they begin using?
Yeah, absolutely. Just like any tool, you don't want to just sort of, well, I mean, it depends on your style. Some people actually do. They take a tool and they start building the house. That would be my dad, and you should have seen the house. But anyway, we recommend training to get the hang of it. Try it out. Start to get your feet wet. And so we do give free training. That is live training by, say, Jennifer or anybody in our customer training department as part of the school pilot. So absolutely, if you go to getmoremath.com/offers, you'll see a button there that talks about getting set up with the pilot. Go there, click that, and we will reach out to you. Or if you don't hear from us, reach out to us at info@getmoremath.com, and we can set that up. Our hope would be actually that you'd be willing to set it for 3 trainings, where there's a training to get you started and then training to kind of advance you over time. Because we found that if we give one huge training at the front end, it works okay. But it's better if we do it in little bits, so you can slowly kind of on-ramp and get the hang of things.
That looks like most of the questions that have been asked. I answered part of those as we were moving along.
Thank you. All right, well, let's conclude. Thanks so much for all of you coming. I just want to reiterate my fundamental statement that in the end, how things go this fall really depends on teachers, not on my tool, not on this idea. But we really love to partner with you and help you with the situation. We have a great staff of trainers and helpers, and we'd love to work together to help you win the not just the fall, but the entire year. Thanks again, and well, have a great fall. Well, gosh, and have a great summer too. How about that?
Thank you.